welcome. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad you're here. Very different for you to have a big band. I've seen you perform as a solo artist before, and I'm trying to imagine what kind of adjustments you had to make after years and years either playing by yourself or in a trio, now part of a 8 or 9 piece band.
Yeah, well, I used to make a lot of sound. I made a career out of making a lot of sound. So this band's different for me because I have to be as minimal as possible. Yeah. So I've had to try and create parts that are just have a small part of the real estate, so everybody else can shine.
Have a little room to breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to imagine, I remember reading that as you were growing up in Australia, that two of your musical influences were Leo Kottke and David Lindley. I'm trying to imagine how that music found its way into your world. Did it come through your parents, or how did you find that stuff?
Yeah, my dad was deadly. He had a really great taste in music, Yeah. He always was spinning records, I remember vividly one day when we moved into a new house that he built, and we were in a bit of a dive before that, and then he chipped away, built this house, and then he was so stoked. And then we had this old couch that we brought, and I remember jumping on the couch and also jumping off the next story. He didn't have the rails up yet, and we had all the insulation bats on the bottom, and we were jumping. It was good distance, from up there down there.
Yeah.
And having a ball. And Dad had Leo Kottke, Deep Purple, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, all those sorts of things playing.
Good jumping music.
But I remember that day, I almost remember every song.
Wow.
The music was such a soundtrack for that day, and we were so happy to be in this big, new place.
Were you 6, or how old were you at the time?
I reckon I might have been 6.
Yeah.
That'll do. About 6.
And how long was it after that before you imagined that you could make music and be engaged in that, as have a thing that you could do, contribute?
I always kind of, I was always out. We grew up sort of in the scrub, so I was always sort of out in the middle of nowhere with my dog, but not so much when I was 6, but a bit older. I had a little motorbike and my dog, and I was always on the coast or in the bush, and I'd sing. I was writing songs before I even knew that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
So it's always been a part of me, and what I do now is still that same process. Yeah. But Dad did take me and my brother, my older brother, to some pretty cool shows. Leo Kottke came through Geelong, which was the closest sort of semi-city to where we lived, maybe about the size of Boulder. And Leo Kottke came through there, and I think it was about $2 to get in, and it was a small theatre, and we went and saw him, and it's very rare for an American artist to tour in that area. Yeah. And I still remember him ripping on the slide guitar and reaching into his pocket mid-song to grab his slide out, and he'd pull his hand out and he'd have his slide out, and I was a little kid going, wow, that's amazing. And I actually saw Leo, had the pleasure of playing with him at Red Rocks a few years ago, and I told him that story, that I came and saw him many, many moons ago. And he was stoked, and he wrote a little note to my father.
Oh, that's cool.
That my father had created a monster, and I went to my dad's work about a year later because I gave him that note, and I went to my dad's work, and he had it framed on his wall.
Oh,
and it was really cool. It was one of those moments,
That's
so he
great.
took us to some cool concerts. I saw the Paul Simon Graceland tour.
Yeah.
So he was really tuned in.
Let's talk, speaking of tuned in, talk a little bit about, little Aboriginal blood coursing through your veins from your dad's side, connection to nature, being out in the bush. You had an opportunity to be, connected to the land in ways that, I don't know whether were you just outdoorsy, or do you feel like it was unusual, your sort of attachment to or connection to the outdoors?
Well, in our culture, our ancestors sort of move with us. So I always, my dad's family was all about shame. There's a lot of mixed families in Australia that that shut down the whole Aboriginal side, and the Stolen.
Tried to hide it, sort of.
Yeah, well, the Stolen Generation
Right.
was where they, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Rubber-Proof Fence.
Yep, I've seen
which
it.
is basically what they tried to do in Australia was breed out the black. So they took any kid that had mixed blood and they took them away from their family and they forbid them to speak their language and they brought them up in a white system. So when my great-grandmother had my grandmother, she disappeared. And the Irish family raised my grandmother and she didn't have her culture and it's quite a broken family, and my dad and his sisters are quite broken from that journey. They knew their culture a little bit, but they didn't identify with it.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like I've just had an old spirit with me, like I knew that since I was a little boy. There's always been an old woman with me since I was a little kid, and I genuinely feel like she, a lot of the time, that old woman, whoever that is, whether that's my relation or someone else, but it's definitely Indigenous spirit, and
Traveling with you.
It comes through my music.
Yeah.
And quite often I'm just a vessel, and I can't take responsibility for that music. I just have to be strong and hold space, but I can't involve my ego or my mind into it. I have to just give thanks. And, just like you'd take your nana to a church, you wouldn't tell your grandmother what to wear to church, you just take her. So, I feel the same way about my music. I just let it be what it is, and I try and just be as respectful as possible.
But if your ego does sneak in and you write something that you're not that proud of, can you blame her?
Well, no, because it's quite obvious when I'm writing something that's like attached to my emotional journey or something with me. But there's other music that comes through that's quite fast and quick, and even I'll stand outside of it and go, okay, I respect it, and may not fully understand it until later.
Years ago, we had a guest, Bob Randall, who was on the show, who's a singer-songwriter who was actually one of those kids who was taken from his Indigenous family and given a new name, sent to a boarding school. His culture, he was 8 or 9 years old at the time.
Yeah, well,
and he'd grown up on the land talking about his favorite delicacy, his treat, his dessert, his ice cream was something he called witchetty grubs, these little worms that were down the base of certain trees, and they knew where to get them. And it was, he had this whole life that was stolen from him, as you said, and he's been around. I don't even know if he's still around, but he sang about it and wrote about it, did some acting too. Yeah,
he's very, 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 very powerful, influential elder from our country, and Bappa passed last week.
Oh, he did last week.
Yeah, last week. So
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, as I was sort of saying in the beginning, you have your eyes open. You have a sense of continuity of history and stories and cultures. And as a songwriter and as a performer, you have an opportunity to convene a big audience. And so the temptation, of course, is to make a difference. So your new CD, Nana, there's lots of songs there that are about, let's come together. Let's find that common ground. Let's do a better job. Let's aim a little higher. Is that something that you feel like your audience is ready for?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a celebration last night in Boulder that was like church, and that's been happening across the US and Australia, and we've got Europe coming up, and it's easy for us to get caught up and lost in the day-to-day grind of it, but I think the bigger picture is far beyond us. And I genuinely feel like this band came together it really was like Bobby and I, we talked about different members, and Uncle and I played, years past, but we talked about, what it would be, but really no one really controlled it. It was almost like our ancestors had a cup of tea and went, right, all these people have to be involved. And it's quite special. I feel really honoured, like Spirit presented these two uncles to watch over us, and sort of be the guardians of this, but none of us really can take responsibility for it. We can just only respect it and create the ripples for those ripples to go where they go over time, because it feels like that.
In case you just tuned in, you're listening to eTown. I'm here with Xavier Rudd, talking about your new band, the United Nations. How many countries are represented across the stage here today?
Oh, it depends if you want to talk about like countries on the map or whether you want to talk about Aboriginal nations. But we got, as far as countries on the map, we've got, Australia, if you want to count it as one, and then different parts of Australia, and then we've got islands off the east, so the South Sea Islands. We've got Papua New Guinea, South Africa. So one fellow who's not with us, Germany. And then if you want to divide those islands, you can add another with Samoa. We've got about 3.
Yeah.
Let's say 8.
Yeah.
Different countries.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And I love the description of how it's just sort of, you kind of put the invitation out there, and the people came and they arrived. I want to talk briefly before we get back to music.
If you want to talk about our bloodlines, there's probably about 30 different countries.
Yeah.
But anyway, go on.
I was just going to say that, recording in Jamaica, there's kind of a tradition, because you made your new record in Jamaica, right?
We didn't make it in Jamaica. Errol Brown mixed it in Jamaica.
Oh, mixed it in Jamaica, okay.
But we made it in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then whatever I was going to say is completely useless.
Not really, because it felt like we were there.
I was there. I was trying to make the connection really between, it seems like reggae music has often been music it's got a message, there's a lot of reggae songs that are about some similar themes, about coming together and trying harder and lifting up the oppressed and so on. Do you worry about that fine line between being, a concert and getting too preachy or getting too message oriented, or finding that balance between the party and the end result that you're after?
No, not at all. Because I'm not speaking from my mind. I'm speaking from my heart, and I'm speaking from what I'm being guided by, which I can't really a lot of the time take responsibility for. Yeah,
I know that you have been involved in some environmental efforts in Australia, and there was an effort to shut down a gas plant on the western part of Australia.
Yeah, we won.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big power struggle, right?
Yeah, it was. It was huge. Even up to the last month, nobody thought that we would win. But it's amazing the power of the people, and big companies will do everything they can to make you feel small as a protest group.
Yeah.
But what I learned from that campaign, what's really interesting is they do get quite rattled by resistance more than you would think.
Yeah.
And the proof was in the pudding, as Manana would say.
And this is after bulldozers and police and arrests and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
And this is just the background is there was a beautiful indigenous part of Australia, a beautiful arboreal forest and coastline that was going to be desecrated by a huge, pretty substantial natural gas plant.
Yeah,
right?
if you look at the map of Australia, it's basically the whole northwest, the Kimberley region. Yeah. There's no recorded extinctions. It's an unbelievable wonderland that's left in the world, not only Australia. Right. It's one of the last remaining wildernesses. So there was a 3,000 hectare space on the map, but there was 10,000 which they had, further plans for, plus a whole lot of other stuff you don't want to know about that the government had planned if they did get that industry through. And the 3,000 hectare space was a gas operation. It was going to be the biggest that the country had ever seen. From memory, maybe the biggest in the world.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of corrupt stuff going on underneath behind the scenes. There was, lots of, Indigenous people being paid off huge amounts of money to sort of swing everybody else. It was quite a messy subject.
Did music play a big part in that movement to stop that project?
Yeah, there was quite a few musicians who got involved. John Butler, Missy Higgins, myself, Rob Hurst from the band Midnight Oil was heavily involved. And from there, we just sort of like spread as much as we could, and then Save the Kimberley was an organisation full of amazing activists who put all of their time into it, 100% of their time.
Congratulations on the success, and of course, there's another challenge right around the corner. So,
Yeah,
but
there's-
now
it seems pretty constant, definitely in WA.
yeah,
And lots of, Australia is, it's interesting because it's it's quite a thriving economic system, and that seems to be a lot of the focus. But we have a system that was only 200 years old, so spiritually it's quite infant, versus a culture that's ancient,
right,
spiritually. So the white culture is like a tiny baby,
yeah,
compared to, and what that baby never did was listen to the old people. And so when we get to the chance where the young baby listens, then maybe we can start to mesh some kind of plan.
So with that, and you think that analogy kind of works everywhere, that it's about it's basically about enlightenment. It's about becoming, living long enough to where you can be wise enough to listen to your elders, listen to, think about previous and coming generations.
I think what human beings in general have lost touch with is that art of listening, that patience, because there was once upon a time where we all, from every culture in the world, we listened to the land because we are of the earth. We're not just on the earth. So we're a species of the earth, just like a tree. We have an energetic connection to the land that is important for our day-to-day journeys. And through domination and religious conditioning and all the factors, we've lost the ability to listen. So it doesn't matter if you're a prime minister of a nation, if you don't have the ability to listen, then you can't really make the right decisions for that land and for the people of that land.
Are we getting hippie, vegetarian, spiritual enough for you folks today? What do you think? It's pretty good, right? This is my stuff. It's funny because just before, this afternoon, I needed to take a break, and just my little trick is to go outside and listen for birdsong. And just have that be the sort of like, if I can really focus in and tune everything else out, that's an opportunity for me to connect again. And I know your birds and bird songs, in fact, recording bird songs has been a part of your journey as well. And I see your feather you're proudly wearing. So I suspect that's another story that we maybe don't have time for today. But
yeah, there's lots to be told by birds. But even just what you said, you imagine if every human being took 5 minutes every day to do what you do, to listen to birdsong, the energetic shift would be massive on this earth. Yeah. Massive. Just by that.
Well, we are going to practice listening of another sort right now, because we're going to get back to music. I'm glad you're here. Glad you stopped by. Glad you have the United Nations with you.
Honored to be here.
Congratulations on your new CD, and welcome back, if you would, Xavier Rudd.
Thanks, man.
Hi, this is Nick Forster from eTown. If you want to stay up to date with all the performances, interviews, and behind-the-scenes footage, click the subscribe button. Thanks.